Get you in the mood.
You going?
Get a little bit of a bop out.
Yeah, that always gets me in the mood.
Yeah, going.
Why can't I hear it?
We're on. We're live
Can't
now.
hear you. We're live.
Are we?
We're-
I missed
Yes.
the intro.
Did you miss the
You
intro?
need to do the 3, 2, 1, go.
All right. Okay, let's kick into gear, guys. Good evening, everyone. My name's Crafty.
So Jesse's
from
sitting there going, I'm not worried about this lot.
No. I'm Crafty from Craftworks Distillery out at Capity under lockdown. And this is Aussie Craft Distillers shooting the shit. So I'll introduce the team and then we'll introduce our guest tonight that we're going to be shooting the shit with. So above me in a little box is Todd, aka the Todd, my right-hand man, my creator. How are you, Todd? What are you up to, mate?
Sitting here out the back of the house in the cold. Looking forward to a good chat tonight.
Yeah, and what are you drinking right now?
What am I drinking? I'm either going to be drinking Cadrona, since
Cadrona.
our guest from Zealandia Baru, or Thompson.
Oof, we're going New
That's the only
Zealand tonight.
two New Zealand whiskies I've got. That's me for the night.
We're going New Zealand tonight. All right. Okay, we'll move on to Luke. Luke.
Hello.
Distiller B, brewer, and whiskey aficionado, and IT specialist that holds this machine that is Aussie Craft Distillers shoot shit together by a thread.
Very,
you,
very
Luke?
fine thread. I'm great.
Yeah.
Surviving the Sydney lockdown. I mean, we
Sydney
don't have it as bad as Victoria, but I mean, still, we've got gold standard lockdown. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, and we've got another week, maybe
Another
more to
week
go.
of it. Yay.
Yeah.
Yep.
What are you drinking?
I am drinking something a little different from our good friends at Karu. Can you see the brand behind there? Morita.
The Chipotle vodka.
Chipotle vodka. It
Very
is.
nice.
It's really good. I'm just having it neat because I don't have any Bloody Mary mix. But it is damn good.
Very
So
nice.
thoroughly enjoying it. And then I'm probably going to move on to. I just received this one today.
Oh yeah.
That was one of those lots I forgot to.
It turned up. And I'm like, all right, I'll have that.
As you do. All right. Well, let's move on. So
Can't give it back anyway.
let us introduce our guest for the tonight. So Jesse Wilson from Chase the Craft Stillet. Jesse, how are you, mate?
Bloody awesome, man. Yeah, good.
Yeah,
I'm
excellent. And
shamefully
you're not
shamefully
you're not-
drinking tea. I'm trying to stay
What are you
away.
drinking?
Tea.
Not tea.
Tea's
It's
good.
been a long week.
Nothing wrong with tea. There's a lot of craft in tea, as you would appreciate.
Not this tea, mate. This is full-on gumboot tea. Hams.
This will power you through the night.
Man.
Let's start at the beginning, Jesse, because there may be some people on who are not aware of Chasing the Craft and Stillet. Personally, I am. I've watched you. I've watched some of your crazy videos, things that you've distilled, and as a distiller, I found it really informative. So tell us a bit about yourself and tell us where you started and how you started and why you started it.
Yeah, sure, man. I was a photographer before I got into all of this, and the seeds were home brewing. So I was making beer at home out of the shed just as a hobby. And basically the commercial gig turned to shit, and I was struggling for something soul nourishing, something to kind of just keep me from slowly fading out. But we also bought a house and had our first kid, so I couldn't really just ditch the salary. So I needed a hobby. I thought about starting a YouTube channel for homebrewing, but that was a pretty full niche. I guess there's a lot of people doing that already. So I decided to go home distilling instead. Basically, the distilling was going to be something to keep the geek juices flowing. I had never done it before. It was something for me to learn, and the same for YouTube as well. So learning the algorithm and learning, videography on top of photography and that sort of stuff. So the whole idea was I started the channel before I'd actually distilled a drop of liquor. And I guess the whole point of the channel is not really for me to teach people what I know, because I don't know sweet fuck all. It's more I go out and learn something and figure something out, give it a go, and either it works or it doesn't. And if it works, people can learn from it, and if it fails miserably, then we can all learn from it too.
Absolutely, the best learning is from mistakes, isn't it?
Yes. We do a bit of that ourselves, don't we, Crafty?
Yeah, that's an interesting approach, Jesse. I didn't know that. So you're basically on your craft distilling journey, and just being warts and all as you go along. Some things work, some things don't, and you're just telling the whole story.
Pretty much, man. Yeah. So, I mean, what was the latest thing I did? Hops gin. I've made gins before, and I've distilled a pale ale, which was interesting, but not really great. Like, hops never really quite worked for me. Distilled spirits. Yeah. But the challenge was to try and figure out how to make hops actually work in a gin. And that one actually turned out really well, which surprised the shit out of me. I thought it was going to be horrible. But yeah, it's not like I've done years of research on how to make a hopped gin before. It was just, I think I did about maybe 14 test runs of different combinations of things and doing things in different ways, and then sort of combined it all at the end. But sometimes it doesn't go as well. Sometimes it's kind of one of those things, man. Like, it's never really a failure, because you can always just turn it into vodka, or
or at least use cleaning fluid or something. Exactly,
man. Yeah.
Lighter fluid, yeah.
And
one that you did, which I was very intrigued about, and I stumbled upon it. I knew about you, but I didn't realize you did this one, was distilling mead. And that is something that I have a real passion for, and actually about to embark on it with a craft meadster. And we're going to explore different honeys. We're going to barrel it. We're going to play around. But you're one of the very few people on the internet that actually did it and explained it and described it, because I had no idea what it tastes like. So cast your mind back to that one. What were your learnings from that one?
That's not actually hard, because one of the actually the last video was it just put out? No, it's coming out this Friday. Is me retasting that spirit after 2 months on the oak. Wow. And the thing that blew me away from it, from the moment it came off the still, was I've never distilled anything that tasted so much like the essence of the original product.
That's what I want to hear.
Oh, yes.
It blew me away, man. Like, I really thought that it was going to come out basically tasting like a slightly an oddly sweet sugar shine. That's kind of what I assumed. And I tasted a couple that people had sent me that gave me hope. One had a really cool, like, beeswax sort of thing going on. A really fresh, vibrant, waxy character to it. But the one that I did was local New Zealand. I think it was kind of wild honey, but it probably had a fairly high proportion of manuka in it. So it's got this amazing kind of almost like effervescent, uplifting, floral and herby kind of like fresh field thing sitting over the top of this honey sweetness that almost pushes down to caramel and coffee and like real dark grungy stuff as well. So both of those things together is really fun. And I don't understand honey at all, but talking to people that do understand honey, the crazy exciting thing is just this giant gamut of flavors that you can get from honey. So it kind of feels like there is no limit to it. I mean, the limit to it is the cost, right? It is very, very expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
honey. But
I think that's
flavor,
the issue. It's the cost that makes it prohibitive.
Yeah.
And I'm quite fortunate because I've hooked up with a craft meester, and he just wants to deep dive and explore this, and I want to deep dive and explore it, and Todd does as well. And we're going to do it. And when I saw your video and I saw how you lit up about the flavors, because I was thinking potentially it's just going to be stripped, it's just going to be like a vodka, but your face lit up and told the story that, you know, there's something there, there's some magic there. So it's cool, mate.
It's so intense that it got me thinking of using it. And spoiler alert, this is kind of the conclusion of the video that's coming out this week.
Look away.
Yeah. It got me thinking of using it not like an ingredient, but almost more like a finishing cask in a whiskey. So it almost makes me wonder if you could make something like 75 to 95% whatever, and then chuck in 10, 15 to 5% honey, and have it as a almost like a seasoning, as a finishing flavor that sits over the top of it. In the same way that sherry or Oloroso or a wine barrel works for single malt.
Yeah.
And then if you think of it that way, then the cost is it's not such a big thing. But I don't know. I haven't played it yet. I'd like to.
We had
an
interesting project. We got our hands on a PX cask that had honey in for a period of time. And it's still maturing away, but
it must be within days of becoming whiskey, that cask.
Oh, yeah, you're right, actually. Yeah.
It's either this month or next month.
Yeah, that's dead right. But I don't know if it's a mindfuck or what, but you taste it, it's got a waxy note to it. It's just, and you go, no, that's just because you think bees. But it does. It's got an interesting flavor profile. So, I think honey's quite a unique thing.
And thinking about how you would use the honey as a finisher, so are you thinking of using it as sort of blending a honey distillate separately and then blending it in, or using it as part of within your wash, or what part of the process are you thinking of pulling it into?
For me, the way that I run, I would, because I don't have to worry about things being productive and cost effective, and like the spirits are not the product for me. The product is the video. So making a spirit is an expense, and then I make my money on the media that's created. So for me, like, I'd probably just, the thing I'm excited about is taking the same stuff and banging it in with a whole bunch of peat. So having this big grungy peat bomb that has peat in the middle, and then honey sweetness supporting it from underneath, and then hopefully this kind of like that effervescent thing floating over the top of it. That's kind of what I'm imagining. But if I was running a distillery and I wasn't worried about, what I could put on a label and call it and marketing and all that sort of stuff, it'd be pretty interesting to throw just a couple of barrels of honey down by itself and then use that to blend back as well. I don't know. Like I said, I haven't experimented with it yet. It's just something that's popped up that's kind of got me excited. And I really don't know which way I'd take it. But I mean, what the hell would you call it if it was a honey and malt product? I mean,
there is a name for it. I'll tell you what it's called. Bear with me. Look away.
I mean, it's a distilled braggot, right? The wine's called braggot. You sure as shit can't call it whiskey. So, yeah.
Well, if you leave it for 2 years in the barrel, do you still get to call it whiskey?
I don't think so. If you're putting honey in it in the wash.
Depends by which rules you play by. If you play by the traditional Scottish rules, perhaps not. It actually leads to my next question. So the Australian distillation scene is pretty vibrant right now. There's something like over 300 distilleries in Australia. It's not that long ago, there was only 60 distilleries. A lot are doing gin, I think there's about 80 from memory are doing whiskey, and the growth is exponential. What's the scene in NZ? I know of Cadrona, I know of Thompson's, I know of the New Zealand Whiskey Company and what they're doing, and Reefton, because I had family in Reefton, so I got a real soft spot for Reefton. So what's your take on the New Zealand distillation scene? What's the challenges and what's actually happening over there?
I think it's pretty similar to Australia. There's been an explosion in distillery numbers. What you're seeing now in terms of product on the shelf is a lot of craft gin.
Yeah.
There's kind of the Fonterra spirit thing in New Zealand, which is a little bit of an interesting one. We can talk about that if you want to.
Fonterra.
Yeah.
As in dairy, Fonterra.
Correct. Yeah. So there's Fonterra make a whole buttload of basically neutral spirit as a byproduct of the dairy stuff.
Right.
So there's quite a few craft gins on the market that basically buy in, Fonterra spirit as pretty much pure ethanol and then bang some botanicals.
It's still a fairly common process here as well, to buy in the neutral, and then it's the point of difference is your botanicals and your brand.
Yeah,
essentially.
Yeah, I mean, my position on anything like this is I couldn't care less, man. All power to you. And this extends to like sourcing whiskey, blending whiskey. I'm all for all of it as long as it's transparent and as long as
transparency.
I mean, like admittance. Okay, cool, sure. Like if it's not a legal requirement to say that it's made from, and there's different kinds of spirit too. Like you could argue that a neutral grain spirit is different to a whey spirit or whatever. But at the bare minimum is don't go telling a florally marketing story that makes your spirit sound like something it's not. As long as you're not doing that, I'm cool. But anyway, sorry to get to the actual question you had was there's a lot of distilleries have got products sitting in barrels, and I think probably even more than I know of that we're going to see coming out. But as you know, it's such a long road to having a whiskey product on the shelf. In terms of what's holding it back, it is kind of disappointing to me, the fact that New Zealand is the one place in the world where it's just completely sweet to distill at home. It's completely legal. That in and of itself, to me, makes it feel like it should be like basically to spirits like California was to beer when homebrewing was legalized in California, and just craft spirits took off, and now it's basically the craft beer capital of the world.
Yeah.
I would love for that to happen in New Zealand. I think probably the two things that are a big problem are, I mean, the tax issue, and you guys have got pretty similar over there. There's no, as far as I can tell, there's no real breaks for the small guy. It's much, much worse compared to especially wine. In terms of tax per unit of pure alcohol, and also just economy of scale, man. It's hard to get big equipment down here because it's a long ass way from anywhere. You can go the stuff from, you can get stuff from China if you want. That's a whole other discussion. But then at the end of the day, you get all the stuff in and you go huge, and we've got a market of 4 million people as a launch platform.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, if you want to really target economy of scale, then basically you've almost got to ignore the New Zealand market and aim for, So I don't know, just all of those things together, I think make it kind of tricky. How does that line up with what you feel is happening in Australia?
Yeah, it's to me, New Zealand sounds a lot like what Tasmania is.
Right.
It's absolutely exploding. And it's got that, and I remember talking to Greg Ramsey from New Zealand Whiskey Company a few years ago about this. He said to sell product from New Zealand Whiskey Company, because it had the name New Zealand in, straight away it had this level of prestige because of security and pristine land and clean water and good barley and all that. And that's what Tasmania's got. And what we got in Australia is it's quite funny because there's a little bit of friendly argy-bargy between Tasmania and the mainland, because the spiritual home in Australia is Tasmania, no question about it. Any Australian distiller will accept that. But the mainland is making some kick-ass whiskies and spirits and winning world awards. A good example is good friends of ours, Karoo Distillery, who we chatted to last week. They just took out at the International Wine and Spirits Competition the best contemporary gin in the world, which was very, very impressive, considering it's a husband and wife team that work out of about a 50 square meter shed at the back of a house.
That's beautiful.
Which was pretty cool. It's a cool story. So I'm getting off the point a bit, but what I'm trying to say is, there's a lot of growth in Australia, huge amount of growth. The mainland has come into its own over the years, but there is very much this Tasmanian thing, Tasmanian whiskey, then Australian whiskey. So a lot of mainlanders are trying to break through that and say, well, hey, Australian whiskey is Australian whiskey.
Yeah.
And it's interesting us talking to all the Australian distillers as well, because it's not legal to home distill here. Everyone has had to go out and learn, doing courses and make the pilgrimage down to Tasmania to learn the craft firsthand from established distilleries down there. Whereas you don't have that. You can do it at home completely legally, and if you enjoy it enough and if you can make a go of it and the economics work well, you can just take it large scale. That's quite cool. So do you see small little craft things like not even commercially, but
neighborhood distilleries,
it's not being sold, it's being shared, or do you see weird and interesting things coming out of
street parties,
the home distilling scene?
Yeah,
it's an interesting thing, man, because I'm not a lawyer. Don't quote me on this. Disclaimer, done. Moving on. As I understand it, the rules are basically exactly the same for spirits as they are for beer and wine and mead and everything else in New Zealand. In New Zealand, as it is from what I understand in Australia, it's totally normal to brew beer at your house, take it over to your mate's place, share it around, to set up a homebrew competition where 30 or 40 guys will turn up and all bring, maybe 2-3 liters of their beer to submit it to the judges, or they all collectively judge together. You can kind of create like a community around homebrewing beer. And technically, that's illegal. Technically. But no one seems to really care because beer's cool. But spirits, I don't know if you know, lads, but spirits are evil. Very, very. So people that are very wary of doing the same thing with spirits, even though the beer guys get away with it. That's not really an excuse. A lot of the guys in the New Zealand home distilling sort of community are older gentlemen that have been doing it for a very long time, and at the very least, they sort of remember back to a time where it wasn't legal. So they, how do you put it? They tend to, in the community, support the letter of the law and say no. Like, no one's sharing it. You cannot give me a sample. I don't want it. No one else is allowed to share it or sample it, on a forum or on the Facebook page or any of that stuff. And we sure as shit aren't organizing a competition where 30 or 40 of us get together and share our spirits around, just because of the perception that sits around spirits. And technically
it's legal but taboo. So distilling is legal but taboo.
No, it's legal to distill for your own personal supply. And sharing it with your mate on a Sunday barbecue is not your own personal supply. The same as it is for beer, but no one cares for beer. I mean, in practice, man, as long as you're not being an asshat, and like as soon as you're trading it for home kill or selling it or any of that sort of stuff, you're just being silly and you're asking to get your door kicked in, for sure. But there is, I don't know, man. There is this kind of hole in the, I don't want to call it an industry because it's not an industry, a hole in the community where that would be amazing, right? Like imagine if we could have one event a year that rotated. Once it was in Auckland, then Wellington, then Christchurch, and it was a celebration of home distilling, and everyone could come together, and we could have like a home distilling competition. There's, I don't know, 3 categories. There's one white spirits, gin, and aged spirits, or whatever. And shit, I don't know. Like you can turn it into a whole event. You can invite you guys to come over and speak about your specialty, or have the people from Gladfields come and talk about malt, or you know, that sort of stuff would be really, really good. And it's just trying to figure out how that fits in with the legalities. And it basically seems like as long as you pay the tax on the product, there's kind of a way to get around it. Not around it, there's a way to do it legally. And I kind of feel like if we could get to that point, then that's maybe the springboard that would really push people towards moving from home distillers to micro distillers, not even craft distillers, which is getting back to your question, right? Where people have got like this tiny little, you know, maybe they got 100 litre still in their shed, but they've got their CCA and they're doing everything by the book, and they can supply one bar, not because it's making them money, but because they enjoy drinking there and their mates want to be able to go and drink a product that's made from lavender and oranges from around the corner. You know, like it would be cool, and that's what I hope New Zealand gets to, and then that can be the stepping stone for bigger and bigger things. But in saying that, man, there's a lot of really cool craft distilleries springing up and doing cool things as well. It's going to be interesting to see where it all shakes out as they grow, and I'm sure there'll be a boom bust cycle of there's a shitload of new distilleries popping up. Maybe we can't support them all, maybe we can. I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see where that all sort of evens out.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what's the roadmap? If you're in New Zealand and you want to open your own craft distillery and you know nothing about distilling, what do you do? Where do you go for training? Where do you just read a lot, or is there opportunities over there, training courses and that? Are other distillers offering mentor type setups? How's it working over there?
I just saw one of your viewers, William, was pretty much asking if I'd considered it too. I did consider it. So basically, still it was like my side hustle thing. So still it's the YouTube channel, Chase the Crafts, the company that the YouTube channel sits inside.
Yep.
And right at the beginning of COVID, before COVID rocked up, the job that I was working at, we were having a few problems with a couple of our largest clients, and things were a little bit shaky. And then COVID turned up, and that was it, man. I was out of a job. So I texted the wife and said that I didn't have a job anymore. And by the time I came home, I already had like 4 texts on my phone saying basically, so we're starting a distillery then, are we? And yeah, like for probably 2 weeks, I looked into it pretty solidly. And no, William, I'm not going to do it, man. It's just, it doesn't make sense for me at the moment. What we were talking about before, the road from the amount of money that you invest and how much of it you have to invest, and then the time until you're making money on it. That's not the sort of thing I wanted to do when I just lost the job. It didn't make any sense. But yeah, like to answer your question, man, I think that the first step is talk to the local council and talk to the customs office, because those are the 2 people you have to satisfy the most, and the local municipalities of where you are in New Zealand may have different standards to elsewhere in New Zealand. So I would very much make sure you get in touch with people at a local level first and start sort of working up from there. The CCA and the customs side of it didn't seem that tricky to make them satisfied.
Yeah.
Just a lot of record keeping and kind of the security side of it as well. In terms of training, I'm not sure which way I'd go with that. Honestly, I think because we are in a country, if we're talking specifically about New Zealand, just get some small gear, man. Spend if you're seriously thinking about doing this as a profession, go out and spend like $2,000 on equipment and go nuts at home for however long you can and see if you actually enjoy it. I mean, why would you not? Like if you can try it before you buy it, why not? And start honing your craft, figuring out what you're doing. Yes, you're going to have problems where maybe you make something that's really tasty on a 50-liter still, and now you got to scale it up to whatever, like a 500-liter still or a 2,000-liter still. You're going to have scaling issues, but at least you understand what a good product is and how you can make that and what it tastes like when it's coming off the still and all those sort of things. Like you said before, it's just this huge advantage that Kiwis have that no one else really does.
Yeah.
So why the hell would you not? And if you get into that, and there's a pretty tight knit group of New Zealand home distillers that, as long as you can prove that you're actually putting effort in yourself and actually trying to learn yourself, there's people there they will give you an insane amount of time and expertise and help to help you out. And the same thing goes for commercial distillers as well. I don't know how you guys feel about this, but I'm sure you guys get approached all the time. Hey, man, I'm thinking of starting my own distillery. Can I come and pick your brains for 15 hours for free for nothing? Yeah. And then 3 weeks later, you talk to them and they're like, oh, yeah, I thought about it, but I'm not doing that anymore. And you guys just gave away thousands of dollars worth of expert advice for nothing, and the guy didn't really give a shit, So if you are going to approach professional distillers, don't even think about talking to them until you've got all of your stuff sorted. Prove to them that you actually care and that you're actually into it, and that's actually what you want to do, and you've already started doing it. And then offer them something back, man. It doesn't offer to pay them, or I don't know, offer to come and help them out on a bottling run or something. But just don't expect people to give you their experience to basically help you set up competition for them for nothing. It's kind of that. But yeah, I don't know.
Over here, there's a real underlying philosophy which has been built basically on the back of Bill Lark, who's the godfather in Australia of Australian whiskey. And it's a rising tide floats all boats, which is very much, someone helped you, so therefore you help someone else. Payback, right? And that's a very, very strong sentiment in the industry. I talk to numerous distillers, and they say the same thing. But what is creeping in as the industry is growing and growing is these people that are coming in and basically don't want to do the hard work. They don't want to do the learning side of it. They just want you to tell them how to do everything, so that they can go off and do it. So more and more Australian distillers are going, well, that's not how we learned. We invested. We invested time, energy in relationships and people, and we did the hard work. We did the research, right? So
learned by our mistakes.
Say again?
Learned by our mistakes.
Yeah, and learn by your mistakes. Absolutely. Yep. So it's as the industry grows and matures, these sort of things happen. I guess it's the nature of it, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think the other thing is too that the people that don't want to put in the hard work are not the people that are going to further the industry. They're not going to do something amazing. They're going to do that. They're the sort of person that are always going to do the bare minimum because they like the idea of owning a distillery. They think it's going to make them rich. They think it's going to make them famous. Whatever. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah. But in saying that, I very, very much agree with the sentiment of who was it? There was Spencer from the Texas Whiskey Trail. Oh man, he had a great way of putting it. It wasn't friendly competition, but it was something like that. It was a really cool phrase that basically said, I'm going to do everything I can to kick your ass and make something better than you because I want to beat you. But at the same time, we're family. And
Yeah.
you need something, I'll help you out. But I'll kick your ass.
Yep.
And I thought that was beautiful because it means that everyone's striving to be amazing. But at the same time, we're all in it together. And from a marketing point of view too, it might seem like in New Zealand or in Australia, you know, there's 300 distilleries. That's 300 distilleries in little old Australia. It's kind of like a flooded market. There's too much. You know, it can feel like that a little bit. But as soon as you get outside of Australia, the same thing with Australia, right? Australia and New Zealand have this awesome image overseas, especially in America and Asia, where once you get over there, it's almost like it's blue ocean. You know, there's only 300 Australian distilleries, and only a few of them are over here. So if you can help another Australian distillery make something beautiful that goes to America or Asia, and people really enjoy it, all that's doing is advertising for you too. You know, it's lifting the bar of it's making Australian whiskey or New Zealand whiskey more and more premium. So when you enter that space, you can command a higher price, or you know, sell more bottles or whatever too. So yeah, that's kind of the advantage and disadvantage of being a small nation, I guess, relatively.
The talking about America, so I had an experience 4 years ago, 3-4 years ago. Very, very strange situation. But anyway, I was invited to Whiskey Live, and all I had was new make spirit and independent bottling, a work in progress, and that is it. And I went over to the US with Cameron Symes from Lime Burners, very established distiller, first wave distiller here, and John Rochford from then it was McLaren Vale Distillery. And the cool thing about it was, so we're at Whiskey Live in New York, and the three of us are there side by side, right? And we're behind our table, and I'm standing there, and you've got Glendronach, you've got Ben Reich, you've got Jack Daniel, you've got all the big ones, right? And there's little old me, Craftworks, that had nothing, right? Seriously, I had nothing. I didn't even have labels. I had handwritten labels, right? And then Lime Burners, Cam had established product, and so did Johnny. But anyway, so I'm standing there behind my table, and I'm looking around, and I'm going, nah. So I did the typical Australian thing, and so I got around from behind my bench and walked out to the crowd. And other storeholders were looking at me going, what's he doing? You know, why is he not behind his stand? And I was just going out, to people and going, guys, have you ever tasted any Australian whiskey? And they're like, God, no, what's that? And so we actually created a buzz in the show. And what we were doing is we were pulling people to our stands, and the more people we pulled, the more it attracted other people. And at the end of the show, they said, the promoters, they said, it was so cool that the Australians were there because they bought different elements. And it was that, you know, fuck it, let's just give it a go. Let's go and just tell them what, you know, what we're up to, sort of thing. And everyone I talked to didn't even know Australia had whiskey. And that just shows you the opportunities. They're out there. You're right. It's blue water out there if you got the time, energy, and resources to do it. And it'd be the same in New Zealand, no doubt, as well, pushing out. And like I said, I've mentioned New Zealand Whiskey Company a few times, kicking goals big time, big times. And what's his name? Cyril. You know Cyril from Cyril Yates, I think it is. No. All right, wrong name. Maybe the wrong name. A distiller, Old Wilson's Whiskey, and come out of retirement.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He's down at it's either Oamaru or Dunedin. I'm not too sure. there's a distillery down there. They're bringing wash out of Spates, so Spates is making it for them, and then distilling. So it's
Interesting.
yeah.
Is that on
yeah.
Marubian?
Is it?
Is it? That's
I'm
the
not
question.
sure. No, don't ask me. I'm just rambling on.
You're just
All
telling
right,
the
one thing I
story.
want to talk about, Jesse. What's our time like? We're not too bad.
So while you're on Wilson's,
Say again?
so while we're on the topic of Wilson's, what's your childhood memory of Wilson's?
Oh, okay. All right. All right. So, Jesse, you know Wilson's whiskey, right?
Yeah, I didn't know of it, and someone gave me a box of old minis, and there was I think it was like 1975 or something. Wilson's whiskey. It's like,
Yeah.
Wilson, this is cool. I did not know they were coming back, so I'm gonna have to check that out.
When I was 18, I went away with a group of friends, and as you do, you tend to consume a bit of alcohol on a beach holiday with 18-year-old friends, and I got absolutely annihilated off Wilson's whiskey, running down sand dunes and face plowing. It took me into my 40s before I could even drink whiskey again.
Oh man, wow!
It scarred me severely. So one of my pleasures is with people come in the shed and they go, do you like whiskey? And they go, no, mate, I had a bad experience in my teens. They go, let's try and get you back on the horse. I think I know how I can do that. So, yeah, Wilson's whiskey. Oh, it's the equivalent of Bundy rum over here. It's got
Right.
a lot to answer for. It scarred a lot of people.
Oh yeah.
Did it what? All right, go back to my question on the US. So, personally, I'm very excited about the US craft distilling scene. I find it fascinating that a lot of it's built on the back of the craft brewing scene, and so they have this in-depth knowledge of malts and brew process, and applying it through their making their spirits. What's your take? Because I know you've been to the US. You spent some time. I think it was down south, didn't you? In Kentucky,
Texas. Texas,
Tennessee, wasn't it? Yeah, Texas, was it?
Yeah.
Okay. What's your take on the US scene?
I don't know as much about it as I would like to. I know a fair bit about Texas whiskey, and that in and of itself is fascinating.
Yep.
The fact that Texas whiskey is only 12 years old now is mind-boggling to me. For some reason, like it feels like Texas and whiskey should just be a thing. Right? Yeah, but it's
You would
not.
think, yeah.
Right.
It's only recently become that. In saying that, what they're doing there is stunning. The climate that they're working with is extremely different than anywhere else that, in terms of known areas for whiskey. The talent is insane there, and the breadth of different products coming out of Texas is bonkers. So for anyone listening, I can't recommend Texas enough. It is literally the Wild West of whiskey, and it's small enough that you can still walk in now and you can probably find the head distiller or the owner hanging out behind the bar, during the day or scrubbing pots or whatever as well. Very, very cool. And saying that, outside of that, I haven't had a lot of experience with it, other than, talking to random people. Matt Drew from Single Malt Matters podcast, for one, I've talked to him a few times. He's coming at it from a malt perspective. He was a maltster, and now he's fascinated with it. And like you said, there is this really interesting thing where just so many of the distillers come from beer, or they're literally tacking a distillery onto a craft brewery. So there is kind of a different wave of whiskey starting to come.
Yeah.
Where, it used to be like no knock on the Scots whatsoever, because as far as I'm concerned, it's fucking magic what they do. And Scotch is my jam. Like that's my favorite thing. But imagine what those guys could do, the same distilleries could do, if they were suddenly starting out again. These people that have got 40 years experience at whatever, Lefroy or Ardbeg or Glenmorangie, imagine if they were starting out fresh, they didn't have to worry about money.
The constraints that they're in.
Yeah, and they didn't have those constraints, and they could just fuck with different yeasts and specialty malts and all of that sort of stuff. And that is what I feel like is starting to happen in America. It seems like there's a bit of a reckoning coming in terms of their guidelines for for different categories in terms of exactly who's going to be able to do what where, and new oak versus second use or fifth use oak, and all those sort of things. It doesn't seem quite settled, but it's exciting, man. It's very, very exciting to see what's going to happen. And how do I put it? I think American single malt is going to be very interesting because obviously America's bourbon country, right? And like you said, Kentucky, Tennessee, blah blah blah. But American single malt is really starting to catch on. So I don't know, man. It's going to be interesting to see how they. Yeah, there you go.
Favorites there.
Some of the one of the godfathers of American.
Absolutely.
American single malt.
One of the bottles I was going to drink myself tonight.
Yes, Westland. We're actually we're doing a Shooting the Shit episode with Westland next month, I think, from memory.
Awesome.
Which is very, very cool. We because Westland, they're cutting edge. I mean, what they've been doing and what they've been doing over quite a few years, and their focus on grain and their push through specialty malts and showing what flavor profiles they can build. Absolutely fascinating stuff. It really is. So it's I was talking to a guy called Bill Owens, who is the ex-American Distillers Institute president. He came to Australia a few years ago, and we showed him around, and he was just blown away by sort of tin sheds in the middle of nowhere and people making whiskey. He thought that was really, really cool. And I told him, 2022, depends on what happens in the world, but 2022, America is my destination. I really want to go and understand what's happening in the American single malt movement, because you're right, there's some really interesting things on there. They're trying to, differentiate themselves from bourbon and play by different rules than the bourbon makers. So it's it's exciting. It really is. And we find in Australia, most of Australian whiskey distillers, I think it would be fair to say, are influenced by the Scottish techniques, the Scottish ways of making whiskey. But there are some that are influenced by the American styles as well. So it's which is good. It's a bit of a hybrid of what's going on out there in the world.
There's some very cool things happening with corn in Texas for one, and the distillery that jumps to mind there is Iron Root Republic.
Yes,
heard
of them.
It's very, very cool to see people. How do you put it? They drew a Venn diagram for me, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but I think it was bourbon, single malt, brandy, and was one other spirit. And the intersection of like the intersection of the Venn diagram of those spirits, bang, that's what Iron Root is. I said, I don't quite understand. They said, well, we've literally gone to all of these places and we've learned techniques from all of these places, and now we're bringing those back, and that's how we're treating our spirit. And you could feel the love and the passion, and there's just something driving these guys that you don't see every day. And little things like that, literally their mum was he said, check their Instagram out, and their mum's out planting heirloom corn varieties, so they've got enough to be able to harvest it themselves and then do a test batch. And if it works out, then they go and talk to all the local farmers and convince someone to grow it for them, which is just the complete and utter opposite compared to what bourbon has been for a lot of people for so long, which is yellow dent corn. The government subsidizes. It's cheap, That's about all there is to it. Fuck it, we filter it anyway. So it's very cool to see people taking what is quote unquote, the American spirit bourbon and bringing it into this like the craft generation as well. So man, and then you have these like both worlds colliding. There's exciting stuff coming for sure. And I mean, let's face it, dude. Most of the Western world kind of just copies America on a lot of stuff.
It is very much a follow me, isn't it?
Yeah. So it would be very, very depressing if in 2021 the American craft spirit world, if that was bleak and depressing, I would be scared for craft spirits in a lot of places. But if they're doing kick-ass things, then I've got high hopes for a lot of other people too, which is sad because, I mean, I'd like to think we'd do it anyway, but who knows?
Hopefully, we can be the influencers one day.
Maybe, man, maybe. I was hoping to get over to Texas again this October for the Bastards Ball, which is an annual whiskey event there. But I don't know, man. That still might be a little bit tight this year. It might have to be the year.
Don't see that happening, my friend. Don't see that happening.
I need to get to Australia too. There's so many cool distilleries in Australia that I need to come and visit.
Oh yes, it's one in Capity that you're more to come to.
So coming back to locally, back to New Zealand, do you find that there's a difference in style or marketing or whatever between the North Island and the South Island? Like we've got mainland and Tasmania. Obviously, there's Tasmania sort of see themselves as their own. They see themselves a bit better than us, I think. But do you see a bit of a divide or a difference or a competition between North and South?
To be honest, man, I'm not that tapped into the New Zealand commercial market to really see it. I mean, I maybe buy 1, maybe 2 bottles of New Zealand product a month, if that.
Mm-hmm.
If I tried to give you an answer on that, I feel like I'd be making it up. But that could be my ignorance.
Sure. So who should we be looking out for in New Zealand? Who's on your radar as doing exciting things locally that we
Spirits
can
in general.
Soren from 1919 Distillery in Auckland. Simply because you guys know pineapple lumps, yeah?
Yeah.
He made a pineapple lump. And it sounds like a complete and utter novelty, like just something to say I've done it and to get a sideways glance, right? And I guess it kind of is, but dude, it works, man. In and of itself, really? It is a good gin, and it straight up tastes like pineapple lumps. So that was impressive. I know how much work he put into making that happen. It was a lot of work.
Wow.
And he's got some great other gins as well. His pink gin's also very nice because it is not overly sweet. It's just it's a really good gin. Who else? Lunatic and Lover out of Auckland as well, because they're doing botanical rum, which is a new thing for them.
Interesting.
That is, it is interesting. I mean, I'm the sort of person that tends to gravitate towards, how do you put it? I would rather pick a bottle off a shelf that I've never had before, and I'm probably not going to like nearly as much as my favorite spirits, but I know there's something about it that is completely different to what I've ever had before, right? So I tend to go for crazy things because it's good inspiration for me, and it's a good, like just another peg in the sand in terms of, that's what a botanical gin tastes like. Maybe I can use that later on,
It is a gorgeous bottle.
Was that, sorry?
It's a gorgeous bottle.
Lunatic
Looking
and
at-
Love It. It's
Yeah,
stunning. Yeah, that's
I've
pretty
just
out
posted it into the comments. They've got two there, barrel rested and silver, and yeah, it looks gorgeous bottle.
Yeah.
I'd pick that off the shelf, absolutely.
Yeah, it's a cool bottle, eh? Speaking of cool bottles, I really like the Dancing Sands branding. That stands out to me. That's just kind of a personal choice, I guess. But yeah, like I was saying before, I mean, I don't get the luxury of being able to make the same thing again. Every time I'm in the shed running the still, I really need to be making content. I don't have enough hours in the day to make enough videos as it is. So I don't get to distill just for the fun of it. And making the same thing 15 times to get a 2% improvement every time you distill it doesn't make good content.
So what have you found has been the best or the most loved videos that you've made? Are you seeing a trend?
It goes two ways, man. There's two types of loved. There's how many views does it get?
Yep.
Which is great for me. It is quite addictive to see those metrics jump, that's for sure. But the videos that do that are videos that appeal to people that don't distill. So if I can make a video that's about distilling, but someone goes, huh, how do you make vodka out of potatoes? Click. That's great for me in terms of the YouTube channel. But it's not it's not advancing the community. It's not giving it's junk food for the community. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
Interesting.
I think maybe the yellow label yeast, the Angel yellow label stuff was probably the stuff that I've enjoyed most in terms of the community, just because it's something that was quite, I was by far not the first person that was using it. There's plenty of other people using it, but it's probably the most fringe sort of thing that I've used and had a lot of feedback in terms of people using it now. And that stuff's wild, man. Have you guys played with that? Have you seen it?
What yellow
No.
yeast? What? It's Vike yeast
It's
we
good.
were talking about, or something else?
The brand is Angel, and everyone just refers to it as yellow label because it looks just like the standard Angel packet, but it's got a little yellow thing on it, and it's all in Chinese or something. So God knows what it says. Everyone just says it's yellow label, but you can literally take. You can
Do not
take.
put in your food.
Yeah. You can take wheat bix or pretty much any starch source. So let's roll with wheat bix. You can take 10 box of wheat bix, throw it into a bucket, put cold water into it, throw Angel yellow label in it, and it'll ferment. You don't have to
What the hell
gelatinize
is it?
You don't have to gelatinize it. You don't have to convert it. There's no nothing. It is bonkers, man. It's absolute fucking magic. So
But what does it taste like?
I haven't made a whiskey out of it yet. I made a soju out of it. So it was literally just rice, cold water, yellow label. It was pretty good. Pretty good. It was very old school soju, not like the new soju. So it had funk and almost like a sweetiness to it. But I like those flavors. Like I like those grungy flavors. So that's what I was aiming for. But the idea that you don't have to gelatinize the starch and you don't have to mash it, that's pretty cool in my book, man. That's magic.
Yeah, wow. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And will
So
that, how much have you experimented with that? Sorry, Crafty. I'm just trying to find the video now because I want to watch that one now. What did you use with that yeast?
The first one was rice, and I did something
right,
else.
Okay.
Ramen. I did ramen noodles with it.
Ramen
noodles.
I was scrolling past and I saw the ramen one. Like, curious. All right. Cool.
Because it straight up tastes like ramen still. and that's not a good thing. Yeah.
Different.
Wow. Do you reckon
Yeah,
it could work with barley?
Oh, it'll work. It'll ferment it for sure. You'd have to crush it, obviously.
Yep.
But I haven't tried it yet. I don't know what it's like. Because once again, like we're talking about all these guys coming from beer, right? I came from beer first, so I'm a very firm believer that the brewing process and the fermentation process has a huge impact on the final product of whiskey.
100%.
Yeah,
100%.
Agree.
Which is
Totally agree.
going back to what we were saying about the Scots, right? Like, imagine what would happen if those guys that they can make product out of something where basically they don't give a shit about that.
Yeah.
Which is amazing. So I don't know, man. I feel like it would probably turn that on its ear, and it would make something that is very different than something fermented with US-05 and mashed, for example. But I need to try it. I need to try it for sure. Oh, Kvike. Have you guys messed with Kvike?
Like, we did actually. We did. We played around with it, but in a very uncontrolled way. The only thing I would say is pineapple and frickin' fast. That's the two things I would say.
Pineapple and farts?
No, frickin' fast.
Oh, frickin' fast. I was imagining slippery pineapple.
Oh, no.
No, it was like we generally work on about 5 to 7 day ferment. We go for a long ferment, and part of the reason for that is because I live in Sydney and my distillery is 2.5 hours away, so it's a timing thing. But also longer ferments means more ester generation, means potentially more complexity. But the Vike, when we played around with the Vike, and in the shed, it was like, fuck me, that's fast. It was done and dusted in 2 days. And it was like, wow. And there are distillers in Australia who are very excited by Vike. There's a distillery in South Australia called Flurio, a guy called Gareth Angela Andrews, and they were brewers that decided the brewing space was getting too tight, so they moved into distilling, and they make some world-class whiskies nowadays. And Gareth is very, very excited by Vike yeast. He sees it as huge potential in Australia and changing the way you're making your washes.
The how do I put this? The most exciting thing for me is because of what I just said, right? Like, I believe in the brewing process to make whiskey.
Yep.
That's not really great in a commercial setting in terms of the amount of faffing around that you do and the amount of time that you've got stuff sitting in a fermenter, right? As opposed to ferment it in 2 days, put it in the still, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am, done.
Yep.
The funny thing is the nerdiest, most anal, craziest brewers that I can talk to are basically saying that everything you know about fermentation, throw it out the fucking window when it comes to Kvike. You want to ferment at 35 degrees Celsius? Have at it. You want to completely underpitch, like put nothing, no yeast in your... Have at it. You want to do it in 3 days? Fine, go for it.
Yeah.
And then it still throws these crazy esters. I used Hornindal, and it tasted like pawpaw or papaya, depending on where you're from.
Remember the video.
And fruit roll-ups.
Oh, wow.
I was like, where did this come from? Like fruit leather. Yeah.
And no off flavors. Hot ferment and no off flavors. It does your head in a bit, doesn't it?
It really does. It really does. Yeah, I need to play with it more. It's hard. It's hard to get down here. I think what's Voss? I think we can get. Is it Voss?
Voss. That's what I was using. Voss.
Right, and that's more citrusy, isn't it?
Very pineapple-y would be the way I'd describe it.
From the wash or from the still?
More the aromas than anything else. The actual wash itself, it was a bit It wasn't scientific the way we did it, and we mixed it in the end with something else. So it was really just a first test to see, how it actually worked. And the main reason we looked at it is because in summer we're not temperature controlled, so we have generally from December through to late February, we don't really distill whiskey. It just doesn't work. We can't brew. So the idea was to try the Vike, see if the Vike could actually bridge us through, because you can, ferment at much higher temperatures. It's definitely something I'd look at it again. It's not cheap. It's definitely not cheap, and you really need to propagate it yourself to make it viable. But it's very interesting. I mean, I remember 4 years ago trying to find stuff about it on the net, and there was nothing. And now, it's so cool. You just get on YouTube. There's just so much about Vike yeast. It's incredible. It's exciting the world, isn't it? The brewing world, particularly.
Totally. I've just decided I need to do one of the magic sticks or the yeast rings. Give that a whirl and see how. Oh
yeah.
Because that's basically free yeast for life, right? And the reason I say that, man, is when I don't think I put it in the video because it was getting to be a long video and I had to cut something. But I ordered the yeast. I think from memory it was during COVID. It took like 3.5 weeks to get here, and I'm pretty sure most of that time was just sitting in a warehouse warm. I finally opened the yeast bag up, and I'd done my calculations, and I wanted to underpitch the shit out of it to try and really push the ester production. And I opened the bag up, and it just smelled like yeast death. It just smelled like autolysis. It's like, oh man, is this even going to work? Is this gonna? I don't know, man. I don't know what to do. So I doubled my pitch rate from what it was, which was still a quarter of what any sane person would pitch, like a standard brewer's yeast at. 6 hours later, humming, absolutely humming. And it literally just smelled like dead yeast. So
zombie yeast.
Pretty much, man. Like, I hate to think what the viable cell count was in that. It can't have been good.
Wow.
So my point being is, like, in terms of, once again, just throwing caution to the wind and saying, screw it, and kind of throwing best brewing practices out the window. I mean, maybe like a magic stick or a yeast ring would literally just get you by. I don't know, man. And you can kind of have your own culture.
Sounds like the yeast that will be most prominent once global warming really kicks in, and every other yeast can't handle the temperature. That's all we'll be left with, and we'll still be sweet.
Yeah.
And you can thank the Norwegians for it, can't you, Jesse? From memory, it's Norwegian originally, farmhouse yeast. Yeah.
But it doesn't get above 0 there, does it?
Yeah, I know. It's a bit
That's weird, isn't it?
How does it tolerate that much heat?
Oh, wow.
So have you got any weird and wonderful projects in the works, things that are like a long-term, slow burn things that you're working on?
Yeah, there's a couple that come
you
to
can
mind.
talk about.
Yeah. Oh, I'm happy to.
I just want to hear everything that you're not allowed to talk about.
In terms of long-term stuff, I'm constantly bridging the gap between. I'm lucky enough to have some pretty big equipment in terms of what the standard home distiller would have. And it's kind of nice to think of it like a tech channel or a automotive channel or whatever. Sometimes it's nice to show off stuff that no one else has got and let them live vicariously through you just for interest's sake. But then on the other side of things, you got to not alienate people, and you've got to do like really, really small scale stuff that someone who's just starting in the hobby and only wants to spend $500, something that's accessible for them. So I'm always sort of flipping between the two. And one of the projects that I've kind of set myself as a long-term goal is to, I don't know how much you guys know of the homebrewing scene, but there's a big thing in the homebrew scene about making basically sugar heads and then different techniques of how you flavor them Oh, I've got some weird feedback going on.
Mm.
How you can flavor those to end up tasting like a whatever, like a whiskey
Right.
or a bourbon or a rum or whatever it happens to be. So one of the things that I've set myself is to try and take that one step further and kind of give people the first step into all grain, but do it with a safety net, and do it in a way that kind of takes all the scary stuff out of it and just lets people have at it, go for it. And if they fuck up, it doesn't matter because I've got a safety net. And I've only done one of those so far, which was I did a whiskey. It was kind of like, it was a single malt with sugar as well. So I really want to keep developing those, and develop the long-term goal is to have, I'm calling them a T501 because it's the next step T500 thing, because that's like the entry level beginners still that a lot of people pick up.
Right.
So there'll be a T501 Isla, there'll be a T501 Speyside, there'll be a T501 Bourbon, rum, so on and so forth. So that's something that's quite exciting for me, but also weird because it's how do you put it? It's purposely making something that is not as good as it could be, if that makes sense.
I think I know what you mean.
It's trying to replicate. I mean, that's what a lot of home brewers are trying to do. They'll look at a beer that they like to drink on a daily basis, and they want to replicate that as much as possible. And when you're looking at all the recipes online, it's a such and such clone.
Yeah. Which is so hard for whiskey, right? Because you can have the recipe and it doesn't matter because there was 4,000 barrels blended together to make that.
Absolutely.
That flavor. It just doesn't happen. But to relate it back to beer, you know how you've got like kit and kilo homebrew, and then on the other end of it, you've got a 3-vessel all grain system.
Yeah.
And then in between, you've got a partial mash or a steeped mash. So I'm kind of aiming for that partial mash, steeped mash zone.
Yep.
To sort of get people going down this end, like to move them down that way.
Yeah.
In terms of
Pull
something
people
that's
through. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And sort of just develop them in terms of kind of show them that it's not that hard. It's really not. Like enzymes and yeast do the hard work for you, and it's magic. You feel like an alchemist. Get on with it. It's
what
not
about
that bad.
the other side of the distilling process? Like, so yes, you've got the core of the grain, the yeast, the aging process, and then the distillation process. But then you've got things like the temperature of your still and how you can maintain or cool your circulation water, that sort of thing. Are they things that you could explore how to do that on a shoestring budget? Ways that you can sort of rig up a water circulation chiller of some form and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Are they sort of directions that you'll go in as well, or is it more about the actual ingredient side?
No, for sure. So remember when I was talking about there's 2 types of videos. One is in YouTube wanky talk. The stuff that I talked about last time are discovery videos. So those are the videos you put out there to get your channel discovered. Like people that the idea is that it's interesting enough for a large enough amount of people that you're hoping that video will just go out there and start being served up to people that have never seen you before, and they'll get interested, come back and see the channel, and the channel will grow. The flip side of that is the community content, which is content that you're creating to nourish and build a community, basically. So those sort of videos are what would fit there. So some person who's never thought of distilling themselves couldn't give a flying fornication about a shotgun versus a Liebig condenser. They don't even know what those are. They're never going to click on it, right? But once people are in the community, once they're already still at viewers or home distillers or whatever. Yeah, sure. That stuff's really interesting to those people. And those videos will never be as successful in terms of the raw metrics that they'll pull. But they're the videos that create a core of regular viewers that keep coming back. And that is so important especially for someone like me that's doing a subject like this, because if I don't have a group of people that I can depend on to call bullshit on me if I'm doing something silly, or pull me up if I've just straight up done something wrong or I've given misinformation, that I lose my credibility instantly. So that's great that I've got them there. But also just from a creativity point of view, right? So those things that you just suggested, when I have people in the comment section go, hey, have you ever thought of, that's gold for me, man. I've got a list of like 400 possible videos. That's probably a slight exaggeration, maybe 150 that I can go and pull on at any given time. And for sure, man, like the nitty gritty technical stuff of, there's a whole lot that gets thrown around in the home distilling community a lot. And then there's things that, it's just like beer once again, right? Like, so the classic one for me is the whirlpooling, when you're cooling and creating a hop cone and all that sort of stuff. And for a long time, the homebrew beer guys were trying to recreate that at home because that's what the commercial guys did. And then they realized they only do it because they have to, because they're using these giant volumes, and we don't have to fucking do that at home. So why even bother? There's some really interesting dynamics that happen between what you can do in a 50-liter setup versus a 10,000-liter setup. So all of those little like nitty-gritty geeky things, for sure, man. Eventually, I hope I cover them all. But I hope I don't, because if I do, then I'm out of a job. So yeah, there's always
multiple ways to cool water or to boil a pot.
Oh, totally, man. Yeah.
Okay, let's. Todd's got a couple of questions.
Do I? Okay.
Yes, you do. In relation to, so Jesse, we started this this channel. What are you up to now? Episode what? 13, 14?
This is episode 15.
15.
Nice.
So, and the concept behind it was that during COVID, I could see that a lot of craft distillers were getting interviewed by different people, but the craft distillers weren't actually, they were only answering questions. They weren't actually given an opportunity to take a conversation whatever way they wanted to, whether it was about product or process or whatever. So I started talking to people in the distilling space and said, well, fuck it, we'll do our thing called Aussie Craft Distillers Shooting the Shit, where we basically just shoot the shit. And we talk about whatever, whether it's process, product, whatever excites. And so, yeah, we're up to episode 15. We've interviewed
TikTok once.
Sorry?
TikTok once.
Yeah, that's another story. We'll talk about that later. But we've been really fortunate because we've also interviewed internationals like yourself. We've interviewed Waterford Distillery, which to me is one of the most exciting distilleries on the planet right now in Ireland, and others. And our approach is really just freewheeling, as you can tell. It's pretty freewheeling. So Todd has some questions about. Todd, I'll hand it to you. What do we?
You're on a roll there by almost asking them yourself.
I know. Finish it off.
Like always.
Finish it off.
So you've seen us in action, and we're obviously a really slick machine, and everything's oiled perfectly. How could we take our wee podcast to the next level?
Different people like podcasts for different reasons, right? Some people like highly edited, produced podcasts. I don't. I dislike it. Yeah, I really dislike it. And the reason being is that there's other forms of media for that, man. That's what YouTube is.
Yeah.
Right? When I edit a YouTube video, it takes me 20 hours sometimes to make one video after I've got all the footage.
Wow.
Which means that you don't get discussions. You don't get people talking about what comes to their mind. You don't get people saying what they really mean. You get people saying what they think they should say or what they think is the best thing to say.
Mhm.
So you never really get to know someone, right? Like you kind of do if you watch enough. And I really try to keep my YouTube channel real, but it's hard. Hard. So for me, the beauty of a podcast is the exact opposite of that. It's free-form discussion. If you want to get distracted and talk about something that's only tangentially related for 45 minutes, that's the point in a fucking podcast. So I'm all for that, man. I think that's great. The hard thing about podcasts is what platforms are you pushing this out to? Where does it go to?
We're going to Apple Podcasts, Play Podcasts, and Spotify, plus
And
the website.
And YouTube.
And YouTube.
Yeah.
And Facebook Live.
Cool. The biggest problem with growing a podcast in my mind is that all of the podcatchers and podcast platforms are not discoverable platforms. So the only way to grow is by word of mouth. They don't serve shit up. YouTube's great, but this kind of content just doesn't fly on YouTube. Look at my podcast numbers versus my video numbers, and you'll see that mirrored in everyone who's Marquez Brownlee, who's one of the biggest tech YouTubers on the face of the planet. He's got 14.5 million people following his channel. I think he's had like maybe 15 or 16 episodes of his podcast is now on YouTube, and it's got like 75,000 followers or something. There's nothing, So trying to grow on YouTube with this kind of content is just, it's like pushing shit up the stick.
We've got we've got 106 followers on YouTube.
Hey,
And that's
We've
good,
broken
man.
100.
we're one-eighth of our way to our goal.
With this kind of content, and 15 of them, that's doing pretty good. So I guess my point is, you've got it hard from the beginning, right? Like there's no real platform that's going to try and help you grow a podcast.
No.
So the networking aspect, like constantly talking to different guests, that's awesome. You may want to consider chopping it up to throw on YouTube. So pull out like a 5-minute soundbite from the bigger podcast that is like a standalone self-contained discussion, and then make a video and throw that on YouTube, because that's got a much better chance of doing better on YouTube.
Okay. That's good advice.
Dude, other than that, man, like all the standard stuff.
And as David says, we need another 700 followers because we have a competition on.
Coupon for the day.
An offer.
Oh, nice.
If
when you hit 1,000,
when we hit the 800 mark, then one of our followers will receive Cooper for a day with Andrew Young. Two of our followers will receive Cooper for a day with Andrew Young at YN Cooperage. We get to make a barrel, and I think take it home.
Yep, walk away with a 10-litre barrel.
How wicked is that? That your own blood, sweat, and tears have actually gone into, and probably half your fingers. And
he's got insurance.
Oh, good. And then we've also got an overnight stay at McHenry Distillery. They've got some cabins in the woods there. So we've got these awesome promo prizes for when we reach those arbitrary but magic
heights.
nice.
We're a little way away from that. Just a little way.
That's okay. It's a passion project.
It is. And it grows every day. It grows every day.
And at the end of the day, it is about talking to great people within the industry like yourself. So we do appreciate your time.
Of course, man. I was going to ask too, like, what's the main goal and what's your main target audience?
The main goal is to increase exposure of Australian craft distillers, so people can get to see them talking about what they do and how they do it and who they are, and the
sharing their passions. Yeah.
Yeah, because there's
So
a lot of passionate people
the
out
goal
there.
of the podcast is not about us. It's not about
No,
us
not at all.
getting recognition or fame or whatever it may be. It is literally about the industry, and getting as much exposure for it as possible.
A little bit of what we were talking about before about the giving back to the industry that's helped us. So
Yeah.
trying to help other people.
And is it about getting that exposure within the industry or about reaching end consumers?
In consumers as well. So in Australia, 1%, total alcohol consumption, 1% is Australian spirits. 1%. So there's massive opportunity for growth for Australian spirits. And part of that is the connection with distillers and distilleries. So, when people understand what people are making and how they're making it, and who they are, and there's people behind the brand, that resonates. Particularly, honestly, since COVID, people are getting back to basics. People are going, I just want to know, what I'm doing, what I'm eating, what I'm drinking, where it's coming from. There's a lot of that going on, and there's some fantastic craft spirits getting made in Australia, and we know those stories, and others know those stories, and we just want to tell those stories more. And we're not the only one. I mean, there's quite a few podcasts that are going on in Australia that have sort of been born out of COVID, and telling stories, and it's great. People love it. I mean, you don't have to watch television anymore. There's enough out there.
Totally. Now, the reason I ask is I think a lot of podcasts like this, and not just for distilling, they run the risk of turning into like an industry inside group, which is great. That's what some people want it to be, right? And that's why I was asking what your end goal is and who you really want to reach. So, like, for example, a lot of what we've talked about tonight is going to be interesting for distillers. It's not going to be interesting for drinkers. And trying to figure out how you bridge the gap between those, that's tricky, man. I agree. That's a challenge. You're absolutely right. I mean, people want to hear from distillers and hear their stories, but if you deep dive, you lose them. So then you're only appealing to a certain subset, the whiskey nerds, the craft nerds. So I
guess that's where it comes into slicing it all up and picking out small conversations that would appeal to the certain audiences, as you say, and putting those where they would make the most sense.
Even that's tricky, man, because I don't know. Like I have a relatively large crossover in terms of my audience between myself and the Whiskey Tribe. And the reason I bring them up is I've done a fair bit of like collaboration and crossover stuff with them. But in terms of active viewership, they don't watch that much compared to the people that are actually distilling. So I don't know, man. That's tricky. That's very, very tricky. And the beautiful thing about something like this is that those distillers, they very, very seldomly get asked technical questions, right? So in terms of saying like, so how are you running your condenser, or what's your copper contact like, or tell me about your fermentation temperature. Distillers will be excited to talk about that because that's the shit they never get asked when they talk with standard media. But the reason standard media don't ask those questions is the average Joe on the street doesn't care. They want to know, like, where did you come from, and who is it?
Which is unfortunate because it's that sort of stuff that gets the distiller excited about what they're making. That's what really gets their rocks off. And they open up. Yeah, they open up and they're talking about something they know. And when anyone's talking about something that they know, they become super passionate. They're biggest fan of their own work and what they're doing and why they're doing it that way and how they're doing it and what their little niche may be. Tapping into that is, and when you finally sort of hit that question and you see their face go, "Ooh, I like that question." That's really, from an interviewer point of view, really exciting to sort of hit on that little pressure point, that little button there. But it doesn't appeal to everyone. Yeah, I think we're in an interesting space when we're not mass market, but we're not full niche. We're somewhere in between.
Yeah.
And I mean, at the end of the day, we do it for us. And we're going to have these conversations anyway, so we might as well record them and put them out there for other people to listen to as well.
Well,
I mean, that's the beauty of it, right? You don't need thousands and thousands of listeners to be able to. Look, the best part of my job is being able to randomly contact someone that I find exciting what they're doing, and they actually reply to me. Do you know what I mean? That's the best part. So, like, a big part of what you guys could be doing is creating, basically networking between Australian distillers and worldwide whatever. And just sort of thinking in terms of what you could do is you could start expanding that not to distillers, right? Like you could start expanding that to
maltsters and coopers.
Correct. Yeah.
We're doing that. We're doing that, Jesse.
Yeah. So then the value you're bringing is you can start playing liaison and go between. You know, like so now you've got contacts all over the world that other Australian distillers will find very helpful. Maybe that's the value you bring to Australian distilling. I don't know, but I guess what I'm getting at is figure out exactly what it is you want to do, because if you don't know what it is you want to do and who you want to do it for, you'll do nothing for anyone.
Let me. I think we need to wrap up now because we're at over an hour and a half. It's been a great chat. But I'm going to give you. I'm going to give you the final thing that we're doing. Which is really exciting me, Jesse, and you'll love this. So Mark Rainier, who was the engine room behind the rebirth of Bruichladdich in early 2000, was totally focused on terroir and taking concepts from wine and applying it into whiskey. And Mark Rainier I've followed ever since. And when Bruichladdich was sold, he packed up his toys, went to Ireland, and created Waterford Distillery, the most exciting distillery on the planet, in my opinion. Very focused on whiskey terroir, and it's all about the grain, and flavour does actually carry through on distillation. So we have a podcast coming up where Mark Rainier has agreed to come on to Shooting the Shit, and we're doing it in conjunction with Craft Maltster that I use in Australia, Voyager Craft Malt, Stu Wycross. And we're going to have a deep dive session on whiskey terroir and what it actually is all about. And so for me to be able to have Mark Rainier and have Stu Wycross together and have a deep dive conversation about terroir is just mind-blowing. And prior to Shooting the Shit, never would have been able to do that. So it's been a platform. It's absolutely been a platform that's opened doors for sure.
Yeah, that's exciting, man. That's very cool. And that goes back to what I was saying, right? Like, you don't have a giant platform compared to what other people might think. But forget that shit. Like, don't compare on metrics that don't matter to you. Like, dude, you're getting, like, how much would you pay to be able to have a masterclass from this guy?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah. And now you're getting that for free. That's worth something, man. That's worth more than a number that says 1,000 or 500 or 400,000.
Or 187,000. You know what that number is?
Me. It took me a while. You started with 187. I was like, wait, that's you guys, right? 1,000. Wait, what?
Just in one episode. Wow.
That's cool. You should definitely be proud of that. That's very, very cool.
Thanks, mate. Jesse, we're going
to
call it. That was awesome. Thank you very much, my friend. It was really good, really interesting. Lovely to hear what's going on across the ditch. And guys, Thank you. It was a great night, and we'll do it again next week. I think we're doing it. Then who we got on
Doing
next
another one
week?
next week? All right.
Are
Yep.
we? Have you
We'll
got
figure
on the
that
list?
out off there.
We'll find out. Anyway, we normally do it.
We're
every 2
interviewing
weeks, but
someone,
during COVID
maybe.
lockdown.
Someone. Yeah. We'll talk to someone.
We'll work.
So I have just posted the links to Still It YouTube channel into the chat comments. Earlier
Awesome.
on, I put in the. Did I put in the website? No, I didn't. I put it on your name, but I'm going to put in the website in the comments as well, so people can find you and subscribe. And I like your little join button too. That's a good one.
He's going to nick it.
I don't think anyone's going to click it, but I'm going to nick it. So definitely, I've just followed and subscribed, and I'm looking forward to getting stuck into all these videos. And you've inspired me to start to get my still set up again. Actually, no, I'm not in New Zealand.
No,
I'm not gonna do
brew.
that.
Just brew.
My brew, my
Yeah.
home brew.
Come down to the
And
shed, Luke.
we're going to learn editing over the week, aren't we?
Yeah, editing.
A lot. Thanks again, Jesse.
Maybe
Yeah.
I'm going to have to hitch up some editing tips.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you
All the
very
best.
much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Have
everyone. We'll see you
have a
soon.
great evening.
Thanks.
Cheers.